I think it's to no one's surprise that this season of anime has been one of the best seasons out of the entire year, with some of the hottest titles in town. Chainsaw Man, Bleach, Spy Family, Mob Psycho. But in all the hype and excitement for these big names, we saw some anime that would have gotten a lot of recognition were in any other season get overshadowed by these titans. Anime like Bocchi The Rock and the Eminence In Shadow had to take a slight backseat for the first half of the season, but then people started to realize these shows are bangers too. Just for the record, we were watching these from the very beginning. We're watching a lot of new anime this season, especially new titles, so we'll be going over everything we've been keeping up with thus far.
As you guys probably all know by now, Spy Family is one of the big hitters this season with more time and care put into its production than we could ever ask for. Wit and Cloverworks Studios have done an amazing job consistently producing episode after episode with crisp animation quality. The one complaint of this series I could see people having is that besides the new addition to the family and an introduction to a new side character, there isn't really much else that's changed, with the main plot barely moving at all. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, as the series continues to be a great and easy to digest show for all ages. Now, I won't say the Spy Family is being carried by its animation quality, but I will say there would be a lot more complaints about the show if it had mediocre art or a few drops in animation quality. But as it is, Spy Family still sits in an S tier for us. Speaking of big hits this season, Chainsaw Man has been the most talked about anime I have ever seen. The hype and attention Chainsaw Man got has been phenomenal, but it's also been a double-edged sword for the series. On one hand, massive amounts of resources have been poured into Chainsaw Man to make it the best that it can be. But on the other hand, the biggest thing hindering people's enjoyment of the show is also the hype and attention it got, even before the anime was in production. People have been hyping up Chainsaw Man so much that when things didn't turn out exactly the way newer audiences were expecting it, some people's sky-high expectations were inevitably let down, which led to many people being disappointed in the production and story. I've even heard people now dubbing it as Midsaw Man, which I don't feel is very fair because the story so far feels like it's just barely getting started. Even with 9 out of 12 episodes already aired at the time of writing, you can definitely tell that MAPPA is trying to give the story enough time to make the events feel meaningful. Chainsaw Man, as you can probably tell, leans pretty heavily on the CGI side of things mixed in with 2D animations, which they do pretty well, all things considered. The big problem is that people are pretty much allergic to CGI. The moment they see CGI, and especially if it's from a show they like, they take it personally, like someone just pissed on their new shoes kind of personal. I personally also don't like CGI as well, and let's be real, who does? But if you consider all the hard work put in with the masterful cinematography and how engaging a watch Chainsaw Man is, I think Chainsaw Man deserves at least an S tier. Blue Lock is the shiny new sports anime this season, except this time, there's no using the power of friendship. It's run or get run over, survival of the fittest, or so we were promised. Blue Lock is the name of a training program where the ultimate goal is to produce an absolute specimen of a soccer player that could finally win Japan the World Cup. The caveat is that if they get eliminated, which 299 of the 300 of them will, they will never get a chance to play in the World Cup ever again. What's different about this show is that the motivation for these characters feel more natural. The reason all these guys participate in Blue Lock despite the huge risk is because they love the sport. They live and die to kick these balls. As with all sports, there are bound to be guys that are cracked out of their minds at the game. But this being a shonen anime, there are inevitably going to be special abilities sprinkled in to keep things spicy. With how broken some of these abilities are, I don't understand how in their universe they still can't win. If these abilities that we see in the show are from high schoolers, then what kind of powers do the top players in their world have? Do they have guys that can walk through walls, or dudes that can stop time? Are they playing against Soccer Thanos? Anyway, Blue Lock is a pretty decent anime overall, but it's not really my cup of tea. I'd put this in B tier.
Amongst some of the biggest names in anime, Bocchi The Rock is still finding a way to stand out amongst the crowd, even though she hates it. We're gonna skip the summary for this because we already made a video on it, which you should go check out. But yeah, this one has seriously impressed us as it's not just some unsuccessful KO knockoff like I originally thought. It has story, drive, relatability, humor, and most importantly, cyberpunk references. Now I know the characters are lacking a bit of detail a lot of people like to see, but with the orgasmically smooth animations and the visual creativity and directions, I think Cloverworks deserves a pass on this because they are just that good. You can see the efforts and resources that usually go into drawing detailed characters go back into the anime with the two things that I just mentioned, and it absolutely pays off in return. As you guys might know already, I'm not the biggest fan of music or slice of life anime, but Bocchi The Rock made me want to keep watching every week. This anime radiates
She just like me for real
energy, and combining that mixed with the humor makes it such an easy watch. Every 20-minute episode so far has felt like 2 minutes when we're watching, and this is one of the anime I can say without hesitation we wait in anticipation for every week. This is easily an S tier and one of the top anime this entire year. Every season of Mob Psycho has been a blast to watch, and this season is no different. Mob Psycho came back to bring us the third and final season of the series, and we were reminded why we fell in love with it in the first place. There's action, drama, discomfort, Reagan's tomfoolery, and of course, accompanying all that is an amazing story. Season 3 continues exactly where Season 2 left off, with the big ass broccoli in the middle of the city. And after a few episodes, we get reminded why Mob Psycho has some of the greatest fight sequences in all of anime, with God Ekubo versus the Broccoli Man. And once you think Mob Psycho couldn't do any better than that, a twist happens in the story. I don't want to spoil any more, so that's all I'm gonna say about that. It's bittersweet knowing that the anime is gonna end soon, but I'm glad that the series even got to this point at all, and I for one am excited to be here when the last episode airs. This is definitely an S tier. After the disastrous villain arc last season that put everybody to sleep, My Hero Academia as a series was looking irredeemable, as that arc was so boring, it left a bad taste in people's mouths that they just couldn't get rid of. Now going into season 6, that bad taste is still there, don't get me wrong, but it's reminded us that My Hero was once a really good shonen anime and that it very well still can be one. Personally, I think this season is actually pretty decent, especially considering that this is the accumulation of all 5 previous seasons, and is what the story has been building up to this entire time. I've missed the days when My Hero would hype me up with some good ass fights or intense moments, which is exactly what they brought back in this current season. Now, manga readers have been swearing on both their dads' lives that this is My Hero's comeback, that this is gonna be the best season out of all seasons that have aired thus far. I'm not too sure if I believe them though, since they've been saying that for the past few seasons, but I do think it has the potential to be good again. So I would say this is a low A tier, high B tier. It's a good start for more to come later.
The Eminence In Shadow was another surprising gem that we got this season, and I'll be the first to admit, I thought it was gonna be some edgy wish fulfillment type show. And all I gotta say about that is, he just like me for real for real. This is like the goth version of Ed, Ed, and Eddie, except it's edge, edge, and edgy. And the best part is that it's just as goofy. Our protagonist has had one goal in mind ever since he was a kid, to become the Eminence In Shadow. And to do that, he needs to be the strongest there is. But eventually, he realizes that no matter how strong he gets, he'll never beat a nuke. That is until one fateful day, despite all his training, he gets one shot by Truck-kun and is sent to the Japanese afterlife, aka another world. Reborn into a world with magic, baby Sid Kageno can finally see his goal in sight. If he can't beat a nuke, then he just has to be the nuke. In his new life, he is living the Chunibyo dream. Any and everything that this guy makes up turns out to be completely true. He's even the badass OP protagonist that has girls flocking to him everywhere he goes. Except, he spends all his time trying to play the part of the ideal background character, and despite his best efforts, ends up being the main character anyway. I had way more fun watching this show than I ever thought I would. The only complaint I have is that I wish his character design pre-isekai was manga accurate. There is no other place I could put the Shadow and Eminence besides S tier. We had high hopes for the second season of To Your Eternity, but let's just say that this season isn't what the first season was. The anime picks up about 40 years after where the first season leaves off, and in that time, Fushi has been living his life to the fullest. The life of a NEET, that is. Fushi has spent the last 4 decades alone on an empty island, afraid that his presence would attract the knockers who hurt the people around him. But that goes out the window when the knockers get bored and randomly start attacking people anyway. So Fushi decides to set out once again in search of a new way to stop them. The charm of the first season was seeing Fushi learn about the joys and hardships of living life. It took the time to show us just how long it takes for Fushi's relationships to grow, and the pain he learns to feel when he figures out just how fragile humans really are. But in season 2, we ain't get none of that. In the following episodes, years pass by in minutes, and there's no time to stop and smell the flowers anymore. We don't get time to get acclimated to our new setting, and we just watch as Fushi becomes a NEET again. To Your Eternity Season 2 doesn't quite live up to the expectations that were set by the first season, but still overall a decent watch. The pacing is pretty fast, and the sense of journey and emotion doesn't hit as hard as the first season. I'd put To Your Eternity Season 2 in B tier. Reincarnated As A Sword is just another fun, lighthearted isekai that doesn't require too much thinking. Well, lighthearted for the most part. The anime's production is surprisingly good, especially for a show with a premise that sounds like they're getting desperate for ideas. There's little to no CGI when the monsters appear, and even if they are CGI, I haven't really noticed. They also have some interesting ideas for this show as well. For one, they actually free the slaves rather than just buying them, and man, it's good to see that we're finally making strides in the right direction. Though, I will say that in later episodes, the show starts feeling less original and falls back towards typical wish-fulfilling tropes. And because of that, I think I'd have to give this a C tier.
Urusei Yatsura is an amazing anime if you ignore the fact that the story fucking sucks. Now, to preface this, Urusei Yatsura is highly regarded as the forefather of modern day harem and rom-com anime, and it was greatly ahead of its time. But oh my god, does the lack of story make it boring to watch. There's also a god tier lineup of voice actors in this iteration, and to pay respect to the original 1980s series, they brought back the original voices for Ataru and Lum to play Ataru's dad and Lum's mom, which is pretty cool, but still doesn't make up for the fact that the story is almost non-existent. Quickly summarized, Earth gets invaded by an alien species and a high school womanizer named Ataru Moroboshi gets chosen as a human representative to battle for control of Earth. He gets pitted against Lum, who's the princess of the aliens, and actually wins against her. There's this huge misunderstanding and Lum thinks Ataru wants to marry her, even though he literally drools over other women while she's watching. Aside from the slice of life shenanigans, that's basically the story. Now, I'll be honest guys, I'm pretty patient and forgiving when it comes to shows, but never has an anime actually made me want to rage quit IRL in the first episode, not even Oreimo. Urusei Yatsura, especially the first episode, carries a lot of the old and outdated tropes that they definitely should have left in the past, like the absolutely ridiculous amount of miscommunication or having the characters yell every 3 seconds. But after the first episode, it got toned down a lot and became a bit more bearable. Still not enough to consider it that much better. The two things that I can't hate about the anime though are the music, particularly the opening and ending songs, and the art style. They somehow managed to capture the essence of what anime used to look like back in the 80s, but they cleaned it up to make it have that modern style and match what anime looks like today. I'd give this a B tier because it's not a bad adaptation, it's just that the base story isn't that great. Coming off of your boy Kongming from the spring season, we had somewhat high hopes for the anime original Akiba Maid War, even though we had no idea what it was about. Just off of pure wild guesses, I thought this was gonna be some cutesy maids serving their masters type of anime. In other words, Alan and I went into the show expecting maids and magic, and what we got instead was gangsters and guns. And as an American, I'm so happy we're getting this much representation in anime. A girl by the name of Nagomi Wahida has always dreamed of becoming a maid, so in the spring of 1999, she heads to Akihabara to find maid work and ends up joining a pig-themed maid cafe called Ton Tokoton. She gets sent off to run an errand with a fellow maid and quickly finds out that maids in Akihabara do more than cast a spell to make your food taste good. They also make rival maids. The anime takes one of the most Japanese things being maid cafes and smashes it together with guns from America, and you get this amalgamation of what in God's name am I watching? More than anything else, Akiba Maid War relies on shock value to deliver the story, from musical gunfights in the middle of the street to people pulling rocket launchers out of their ass like in GTA. And I have to admit, it's pretty entertaining at first, but it relies a lot on the shock factor. And once you get over the initial thought of, oh what the f, and brace yourself for anything, the anime feels a bit repetitive trying to pull a reaction from you. Overall though, it isn't that bad of a watch, and it could be a lot worse. It's like a B tier. You guys might clown on us for this, but More Than a Married Couple But Not Lovers is surprisingly pretty decent. As part of a curriculum in school, students are forced to pair and live together with an assigned partner of the opposite sex as a mock married couple. Damn, I wish my school had this. Then again, knowing my luck, I would have been paired with the biggest, ugliest girl in class. Sorry, Olga. This curriculum is known as the Marriage Practical, and the purpose of it is to develop social skills between significant others, which is probably what it says on paper, but in reality, they're probably using it to combat the dwindling Japanese population,
if you know what I mean.
The students are ranked by how well they work together, and those that are ranked within the top 10 are able to switch partners with any other couple also within the top 10. Our main character Jiro, who's a bit of a geek and has unrequited feelings for his childhood friend Shiori. Wait, why does she look so familiar? Oh my god. Jiro gets paired with Akari, a gyaru who has a crush on the hottest guy in school, Tenjin. At first they're like an absent father and child support, and don't get along at all. But when they realize they share the common goal of wanting to trade partners, they do their best to work together to try and make their way into the top 10 couples. Now I know that you guys know that Alan and I love trashy, slightly ecchi anime, but all bias aside, this shit is actually kinda good. As many fan service shots as there are, the story is fairly wholesome and the characters are somewhat likable. Now I know you guys don't know much about voice actors, but genuinely the voice acting, especially Akari's voice actor, makes the anime so much more enjoyable to watch. Onishi Saori came back to voice a pink-haired heroine again to prove to her fans that she can do more than put us all to sleep. And thank God she did. This anime looks generic on paper, and it kinda is. but there's something about it that just pulls me back to watch it every single week. Whether it be the story or the big booby waifu, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, I would put this in A tier. Love Flops is like the ghetto dollar store version of the quintessential quintuplets, if the male MC thought with this head instead of this one, and the dirty jokes was cranked up to 1,000. Words can't even begin to describe how indescribably bad, random, and ecchi this anime is, so I'll let the scenes speak for themselves. Cue the music. Now that your eyes have thoroughly been through the same trauma as mine, let's discuss the good parts of this anime.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a D tier. And that wraps up every anime we're watching this season. There's a lot of new stuff to watch this time around, and we frankly had a hard time keeping up week by week because we've just been so busy lately with the holiday season hitting us like a bag of bricks. But don't worry, we caught up just in time to make this video. Anyways, happy holidays everyone, stay safe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.